Violet won $5 million in the lottery and decided to divorce her husband without him knowing so she could keep all the money. But on the day they signed the papers, he revealed a secret that destroyed Violet. Violet was at home, tired after another long day at the sewing machine. She looked at the lottery ticket on the table without much hope, as she did every week. "Just another ticket that won't win anything," she muttered to herself as she picked up the paper and checked the numbers on the TV. But as the numbers were announced, her eyes began to widen, first 2 numbers and then another and another. "No, it can't be," she said, her heart racing. When the last number was revealed, she dropped the ticket on the floor in disbelief. "I won! My God, I won $5 million! She stood up, her legs trembling, and looked around the small living room. It was real. The truth began to take shape in her mind. Her entire life was about to change. The exhaustion, the frustration, the worries, all of it seemed to disappear. Violet didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I can't believe it. Finally, a chance to live without worries and with dignity." She laughed, still a bit nervous, and threw herself onto the couch, pressing the ticket against her chest. "I won," she repeated, this time more firmly. The 55-year-old seamstress, who had always dreamed of a better life, was now facing a unique opportunity. Violet was still holding the ticket tightly, but something began to bother her. She thought of James, her husband, who was in the kitchen, unaware of what had just happened. They had been together for many years, and he had always been a good husband. But in Violet's mind, a doubt crept in. She looked at the ticket and then at the kitchen door. "James will want to split everything, of course," she thought out loud, but then another idea came to her. "But I was the one who always bought these tickets. Years of trying, dreaming, believing. I deserve this, just me." Violet bit her lip, slowly stood up, and hid the ticket in her pocket. She felt guilty, but the decision was made. She was going to hide the prize from James. She didn't want to share that fortune. After all, she convinced herself, she had the right to enjoy it alone. When she walked into the kitchen, hiding her unease, James looked up from the newspaper and smiled at her. "You seem different, Violet. Is everything okay?" "Yes, James. Everything's fine. I'm just thinking about how life can take some turns sometimes." She forced a smile, and before he could ask more, she changed the subject. "What do you think about us ordering pizza tonight?" He laughed, surprised by the suggestion, but agreed. "Sounds like a good idea." Violet felt relieved to have managed to hide her agitation. While her husband was distracted, she thought about what she would do next. Now that she had decided to hide the prize, she needed to be careful. No one could know. Days went by and Violet couldn't stop thinking about the prize. The money was there, waiting for her, but there was one thing still bothering her: James. She knew that as long as they stayed married, she wouldn't be able to enjoy the fortune alone. The idea of sharing it made her restless. Slowly, a solution began to form in her mind. Divorce. "If I divorce now, I can keep it all," she thought, as she ran her hand over the fabric of a dress she was sewing. "He'll never suspect. Never." That night, while James watched TV, she observed him with different eyes. He seemed so calm, so distracted, unaware of what was coming. Violet sat next to him on the couch, trying to appear natural, but her heart was beating faster. "James," she began, choosing her words carefully, "have you ever thought about what our life would be like if, I don't know, we weren't together anymore?" James frowned, turning to her. "What do you mean by that, Violet? Are you talking about separation? Why are you thinking about this?" She looked away for a second, but quickly recovered. "I'm just thinking. We've been through so much, but sometimes I wonder if we're still happy together. Maybe it would be better to go our separate ways." He was silent for a moment, surprised. "I never thought about that, Violet. I thought we were fine, and now you're dropping this bombshell out of nowhere." She sighed, trying to seem sad. "I thought so too, but I don't know. Maybe it's time to reconsider a few things." James shook his head, confused. "Is this serious? Do you really want this?" Violet felt a chill down her spine, but she kept her composure. "Just a thought. We need to think about what's best for both of us. I'm tired. Just a thought. Nothing serious." As James absorbed those words, Violet, inside, was preparing for the next step. Divorce would be her chance to start a new life, without ties, without having to share her prize. She was determined. James had always been the type of man who believed in the value of hard work. At 58 years old, he spent his days on construction sites, facing the sun and rain, carrying heavy materials, and coordinating the team with the precision of someone who knew what he was doing. He came home tired, but never complained. On the contrary, he felt proud to be able to support his family and ensure nothing was missing. On weekends, while most men rested, James was in the yard fixing something or making repairs around the house. Everything had to be in order. He was the type of person who believed that if something was worth doing, it should be done well, and that included taking care of Violet. James always made sure to help her with the little things, whether washing the dishes after dinner or tending to the garden so she could rest. "Violet, let me take care of this," he'd say with a smile, even after a long day of work. For him, marriage was a partnership. He was never one for grand romantic gestures, but he showed his love in every act of care, in every concern for her well-being. James managed the household with the same dedication he had at work, ensuring everything ran as it should. He was always careful with the bills, planning for the future, thinking about what would be best for both of them. "We have to be prepared, Violet. You never know what tomorrow will bring," he would say, with a calm and firm tone. But despite all this dedication, James had no idea that something was wrong. He believed they were living a peaceful life, that everything was under control. To him, Violet was the wife he had always wanted to protect and care for. He trusted her, and it never crossed his mind that something might be changing. As the days passed, Violet became more and more convinced that the lottery prize was hers alone. "I was the one who bought the tickets every week with my money," she repeated to herself, as she organized the threads and needles on the sewing table. James never cared about that. If it were up to him, we'd never have won anything. Sitting in her chair, Violet remembered the times he had laughed, saying the lottery was a waste of time. "You'll never win, Violet. It's just an illusion," he would say, always with a smile. "Stop wasting money on that, dear." But Violet didn't listen. She kept buying, always believing that one day luck would change. Now, with the winning ticket in hand, she felt that all that dedication had finally paid off. "I was the one who had faith. I was the one who never gave up. This money is mine." One afternoon, while folding clothes in the living room, James came in and commented, not knowing anything, "You know, Violet, you should stop buying those tickets. We could save that money for other things." She looked at him and inside felt a surge of anger, but she hid it. "Oh, James, it's just a bit of fun, nothing serious." He laughed, not noticing the tension in the air. "You and your bets." After he left, Violet murmured to herself, "I deserve this prize. I was the one who believed, I was the one who spent. I'm not going to share what's rightfully mine." She was convinced that she deserved it all to herself. After all, it was her dream, her struggle, and now it would be her victory. Violet was already decided. There was no turning back. With the lottery prize kept under tight security, she knew the next step was to get rid of James without him ever suspecting a thing. One afternoon, while he was at work, Violet sat at the kitchen table, picked up the phone and made a call to a lawyer. "I'd like to discuss a divorce," she said in a low voice so no one could hear. "Yes, something quick and discreet." On the other end of the line, the lawyer asked a few questions and Violet answered without hesitation. "I want everything to be done as simply as possible. No complications." In the days that followed, Violet began preparing the necessary documents. She spent hours reviewing everything, making sure nothing would slip through the cracks. She always did this while James was out, so he wouldn't notice what was happening. When he came home tired from work, she greeted him with the same smile as always, hiding any nervousness. "How was your day, James?" she asked, setting dinner on the table. He, with no idea of anything, replied with a tired smile. "The usual, Violet. Lots of work, but everything's fine." She nodded, keeping her tone light. "That's good. You deserve to rest." But inside, her mind was far away. She was already picturing her life without James, free to enjoy the money she had dreamed of for so long. With each step in preparing the documents, Violet felt closer to her new life. And while James remained clueless, She continued with her plan, confident she was doing the right thing. On a sunny morning, Violet was in the garden trimming the plants when her neighbor Elizabeth appeared on the other side of the fence, as she often did for a chat. Elizabeth, with her friendly manner, smiled and asked, "Good morning, Violet. How are things? You've been busy lately." Violet, still holding the pruning shears, gave a smile. "Oh, Elizabeth, you have no idea. Things have been interesting around here." Elizabeth, curious, leaned a little closer over the fence. "What happened? Is there any news?" Violet looked around, making sure no one was nearby. She felt the need to share her joy with someone, even though she knew she shouldn't. "Do you promise you won't tell anyone?" Elizabeth widened her eyes, excited. "Of course, Violet. I'm good at keeping secrets. You can tell me." Violet took a deep breath before continuing. "I won the lottery, Elizabeth. I still can't believe it. It's a lot of money." Elizabeth nearly dropped the watering can she was holding. "The lottery? Violet, that's incredible. How much did you win?" Violet bit her lip, looking around, still feeling a bit guilty for sharing. "It was a pretty big amount. Big enough to change my life. Forever." Elizabeth shook her head, amazed. "Wow, Violet, I'm so happy for you. Does James know yet?" Violet hesitated before replying with a slight tone of distrust. "No, not yet. I'm waiting for the right moment." Elizabeth frowned, puzzled. "I see. But you're going to tell him, right?" Violet forced a smile, trying to push away the tension. "Of course, I'll tell him when the time is right." Inside, though, Violet knew that revealing the secret was a risk, but seeing Elizabeth's reaction gave her a sense of power, as if she were one step closer to getting everything she desired. Sarah, Elizabeth's daughter, was studying in the living room when she overheard the conversation between her mother and Violet. She couldn't help but listen, especially when she heard Violet mention the word lottery. Curious, Sarah moved closer to the window discreetly and heard everything. Later that same day, while Violet was already inside the house, Sarah went to the kitchen where Elizabeth was preparing dinner. "Mom, what was that you were talking about with Violet about the lottery?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Elizabeth, still surprised by Violet's revelation, looked at her daughter. "You won't believe it, Sarah. Violet won the lottery. She said she hasn't told James yet." Sarah paused for a moment, her thoughts starting to come together. "She hasn't told her husband?" she asked, intrigued. "Why would she hide that?" Elizabeth shrugged, not thinking much of it. "Oh, who knows, dear? Maybe she's waiting for the right moment." But Sarah, who was studying law and was used to dealing with complicated situations, felt there was more to it. "Mum, don't you think that's strange? Violet is married and winning the lottery is a huge deal. Hiding that from James could be a serious problem." Elizabeth looked at her daughter, noticing the worried tone. "Do you think she's up to something, Sarah?" Sarah bit her lip thoughtfully. "I don't know, Mum, but if she's hiding this, she might have other intentions. I think she's planning to keep the money all to herself, and if that's the case, James has the right to know." Elizabeth nodded, starting to grasp the seriousness of the situation. "You're right, Sarah, this doesn't seem right." Sarah, determined to protect James's rights, decided she needed to act. "I'm going to investigate this, Mum. If she's trying to cheat him, I'll do everything I can to make sure James finds out before it's too late." And so Sarah began to devise a plan. She knew she needed to be careful, but she was determined to find out exactly what Violet was doing and prevent James from being deceived. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with her mother. Violet's plan was sneaky, and the idea that James was being deceived made her furious. She knew she had to do something. She couldn't just ignore what she had overheard. That same night, Sarah went to James's house. She knew she had to be delicate, but she also needed to be direct. When James opened the door and saw her there, he was surprised. "Sarah, what are you doing here at this hour?" She took a deep breath, determined not to back down. "James, I need to talk to you. It's important." James noticed the seriousness on her face and invited her in. They sat in the living room, and Sarah began to speak, choosing her words carefully. "James, I know it might seem strange for me to come here, but there's something you need to know. Something involving Violet." James frowned, worried. "What happened? Is she okay?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, but then continued. "Not exactly, James. I found out that Violet won the lottery, and she's hiding it from you." James's eyes widened in surprise. "She won the lottery and didn't tell me?" Sarah nodded, seeing the confusion and hurt starting to appear on his face. "She told my mum, but hasn't said anything to you yet. I don't know all the details, but I think she's planning something. Something that doesn't include you." James sat in silence, processing the information. "She's hiding this from me? After everything we've been through together?" Seeing James's anguish, Sarah placed her hand on his shoulder. "James, I'm on your side. I don't think it's fair what she's doing. If she's trying to deceive you, I want to help you find out the truth and make sure your rights are protected." James looked at Sarah, still trying to grasp what was happening. "I never imagined Violet would do something like this, but if you think something's wrong, I trust you." Sarah felt her determination grow. "We'll find out together, James. I won't let you be taken advantage of. We'll uncover what she's up to and make sure you get what's rightfully yours." James nodded, now determined to get to the bottom of this. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but with Sarah's help, he was ready to face whatever it took. In the days that followed, James couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with Sarah. Every gesture from Violet, every word she said, now seemed to have a different meaning. He began to watch his wife more closely, looking for signs that he had previously overlooked, and slowly doubt began to take hold of him. One night while they were having dinner, Violet brought up the subject of divorce. "James, I think we should go ahead with what we talked about. I've thought about it a lot, and I think it's best for both of us." James looked at her, studying her face. There was something different in her tone, a coldness he didn't recognize. "Are you sure this is what you want, Violet? After all these years?" She avoided his gaze, playing with her food with a fork. "I think so, James. Maybe it's the best for both of us." James felt a tightness in his chest, but remained firm. "I'm not so sure, Violet. Not now." Violet paused, surprised by his response. "What do you mean? We've already talked about this." James crossed his arms, looking at her with suspicion. "Yes, we talked, but something doesn't feel right. I can't understand why you're so eager for this." Violet tried to hide her anxiety, but her voice came out a bit shaky. "I just think it's for the best, for both of us." James shook his head, determined. "I'm not signing anything, Violet. At least not until I understand what's really going on here." Violet felt her heart race. "Are you accusing me of something, James?" He stared at her, firm. "I just want to know the truth. Something's different about you, and I feel there's more behind this divorce story. Until then, I won't sign anything." Violet remained silent, trying to disguise her nervousness. James was starting to see through her, and it made her uneasy. "Fine, James, if that's what you want." But inside, she knew she needed to act fast. James was becoming suspicious, and that could jeopardize her entire plan. James, on the other hand, was more alert than ever, determined not to be deceived. The next day, James sought out Sarah to talk. He knew he needed to proceed carefully, but he also knew he couldn't do this alone. When they arrived at Sarah's house, he got straight to the point. "Sarah, I think you were right. Violet is hiding something, and I need to find out what it is." Sarah, who had already been thinking about how they could resolve the situation, looked at him seriously. "James, if she really won the lottery and is hiding the ticket, we need to find it before she does anything." James agreed, worried. "But how are we going to find out where she hid it? Violet has always been careful." Sarah thought for a moment and then suggested, "We need to think like her. Where would someone hide something so valuable? The safest place would be somewhere no one would think to look." James nodded, reflecting. "She always keeps important things in her purse or in the bedroom drawer. But if it's something she doesn't want me to find, it might be in a less obvious place." Sarah smiled, an idea forming. "What if we created a situation where she needed to get the ticket, something that forced her to show where it is?" James raised his eyebrows, interested. "What do you have in mind?" Sarah calmly explained the plan. "We'll make her think she needs the ticket to prove something, maybe a fake phone call saying there's a problem with the prize. I could call pretending to be someone from the lottery, saying she needs to present the ticket immediately to avoid losing the prize. James liked the idea. That might work. If she believes she needs to show the ticket, she won't have a choice but to reveal where it is. Sarah agreed. Exactly. But you need to be nearby, somewhere you can see what she does. That way, when she gets the ticket, you'll know where it is. James smiled for the first time in days. Let's do this, Sarah. I'll make sure she doesn't deceive me. Until then, I'll keep searching at home. With the plan in place, both were ready to put the idea into action. That same night, after setting the plan in motion, James was at home trying to act normally. He and Violet had dinner together, and everything seemed as usual. But inside, James was alert to every detail. Violet, as usual, decided to take a bath before bed. "I'm going up for a bath," she said with a smile as she gathered her robe. James, sensing the opportunity, waited a few minutes after she went upstairs. When he heard the shower running, he calmly got up and went to the bedroom. His heart was racing, but he knew he needed to be quick and silent. He started searching carefully, going through places where Violet might have hidden something important. He opened drawers, looked in the closet, but found nothing. Then, when he opened the bedside table drawer, he saw Violet's wallet. He hesitated for a second, but then picked it up. With slightly trembling hands, James opened the wallet, and there it was, folded carefully in one of the compartments, the lottery ticket with the winning numbers right in front of his eyes. He felt a mix of relief and sadness. "So it's true," he murmured to himself, holding the ticket. Everything Sarah had said, all the suspicions, were now confirmed. The sound of the shower continued, indicating that Violet was still occupied. James knew he didn't have much time. He carefully put the ticket in his pocket, closed the wallet, and placed it back exactly as it was before. Leaving the bedroom, James quietly went downstairs. He needed to think about the next step. Now that he had the ticket, everything would change. Sitting in the living room with the ticket safe in his pocket, he waited for Violet to come down, pretending that nothing had happened. Violet, unaware of what had just occurred, came down minutes later, still drying her hair. "Everything okay down here?" she asked, suspecting nothing. James looked at her, masking his thoughts. "Everything's fine, Violet. Just thinking about a few things." She smiled, not knowing that the secret she had so carefully guarded was now in his hands. James, with the ticket in his possession, knew that the moment of truth was approaching. With the lottery ticket secure in his pocket, James felt the weight of the situation bearing down on him. He couldn't believe that Violet, the woman he had shared so many years with, was willing to deceive him in such a cold way. But at the same time, he knew he had to act carefully. He couldn't let her realize that the game had changed. That night before bed, James waited until Violet fell asleep. Then, he quietly got up and went to the makeshift office in the basement. There, he hid the ticket in one of the books she never touched, between the pages of an old dictionary he used for work. "Here, no one will find it," he thought, as he put the book back on the shelf. When he returned upstairs, he found Violet sleeping soundly. James lay down beside her, staring at the ceiling, knowing that a confrontation was inevitable, but that he needed to choose the right moment. The next day, he acted as if nothing had changed, keeping to the usual routine. "I'm going out for a bit. Need to take care of a few things in town," he said as they had breakfast. Violet, suspecting nothing, just agreed. "Okay, James. Don't forget to stop by the market." James gave a slight smile, controlling the anger he still felt. "I won't." But inside, he was planning every detail. He knew that the time to confront Violet was approaching, but he wanted her to believe she still had everything under control. He didn't just want the truth, he wanted her to know that he knew. As the days passed, James watched Violet closely, waiting for the exact moment to act. When the time came, he would be ready to reveal that the ticket was no longer in her hands and that things wouldn't go as she had planned. James decided it was time to take the next step. He knew he needed to deceive Violet, making her believe she was still in control. So that night, during dinner, he began to put his plan into action. "Violet," he said, putting his fork down and looking at her with a calm expression, "I've been thinking a lot about everything we discussed. I think you're right." Violet looked up, surprised by his change in tone. About what, James? About the divorce, he continued, choosing his words carefully. Maybe it's the best thing for both of us. If it's what you really want, I don't think it's worth delaying any longer. She masked her surprise, but inside she felt relieved. You're sure? I don't want you to do anything against your will. James forced a smile, trying to appear resigned. Yes, I've thought it over a lot, and I think it's for the best. But before signing the papers, I'll need 2 days to get some things in order. It's not an easy decision, and I want to be properly prepared. Violet nodded, seeming to understand. Of course, James, I understand. I think 2 days is reasonable. He looked at her with a pained expression. Thank you for that, Violet. I'll use these days to think everything through and get organized. She smiled, believing she was finally getting what she wanted. All right, James. I know it's difficult, but we'll get through this. Inside, James felt anger and sadness, but he knew he needed to keep up the act. I'm going to take a walk tomorrow to clear my mind. These days will help me process everything. Violet, convinced that her plan was working, agreed. I'll also take some time to think things over. Maybe this is the best for both of us. Violet, now more relaxed, spent the next 2 days convinced that everything was going according to plan. She saw James acting more calmly, seemingly resigned to the idea of divorce. This made her relax, thinking he had truly accepted the situation. During breakfast on the second day, Violet casually commented, "You've been so understanding, James. I think this will make things easier for both of us." James, hiding what he really felt, smiled slightly. "I just want us to be able to move on, Violet. If this is what you want, I'm willing to cooperate." She smiled back, satisfied. "I appreciate that. I really think we're doing the right thing." As she spoke, Violet had no idea that James already knew everything. He watched her calmly, as if he were just waiting for the right moment to act, while she continued to believe she was still in control. Later that afternoon, while she was organizing some clothes in the bedroom, Violet passed by the wallet where she had hidden the winning ticket. She didn't even bother to check if it was still there, so confident was she that James had no idea what was going on. James, from the hallway, watched from a distance, noticing how relaxed Violet seemed. He knew the ticket was safe in another place, but he kept a neutral expression, giving no sign that anything had changed. Violet continued her day as if everything was going according to plan. She believed that soon she would be free and holding the fortune in her hands. Her confidence blinded her, preventing her from realizing that James had already uncovered her most carefully guarded secret. On the scheduled day, James and Violet arrived at the courthouse. Violet was strangely calm. She had spent the last few days certain that she had everything under control. After they signed the papers, Violet looked at James, trying to read his emotions, but he remained impassive. "James," she began, trying to soften her voice, "before we sign the papers, there's something I need to tell you." James raised his eyebrows, pretending to be surprised. "Oh, really? What is it?" Violet paused dramatically, as if she were about to reveal a big secret. "I won the lottery." She waited for a reaction, believing he would be surprised, maybe even regretful for agreeing to the divorce. "I won a huge amount, James. I was planning to use that money to start a new life." James looked at her, keeping his face neutral. "Really? That's a surprise, Violet." Violet smiled, thinking he was beginning to understand the situation. "Yes, I was going to tell you earlier, but I thought it would be better to wait until we had everything resolved." He nodded slowly, as if he were processing the information. "I see. And where is the ticket? I imagine it's something very important to you." Violet hesitated for a moment, confident that the ticket was safe in her wallet. "It's kept in a safe place." James couldn't help but smile, but kept a serious tone. "You know, Violet, there's something I need to tell you as well." She frowned, not understanding the change in his tone. "What is it?" James leaned forward slightly, looking her in the eyes. "I already know about the ticket. And more. I found it." Violet's face went pale. "What? That's not possible." James shook his head, interrupting her. "I found the ticket days ago. Since then, I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you. I thought it would be interesting to see how far you would go." Violet was in shock, unable to speak. "James, how did you—" He didn't let her finish. "Violet, I've already cashed the money. Everything you were planning isn't going to happen the way you thought." Violet felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Everything she had planned, all the certainties she had, collapsed in an instant. James calmly stood up. "Now let's deal with what really matters. Things have changed, Violet, and you'll have to deal with it." The surprise she had planned backfired, leaving her completely speechless. James had won, and now she had to face the consequences of her actions. Violet could hardly believe what she was hearing. The courthouse, which seemed to be the stage for her victory, now became a place of defeat. She looked at James, still trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. "James, you can't be serious." James kept his gaze steady, not wavering. "I'm very serious, Violet. I knew about the ticket even before you suggested the divorce. And yes, I've already cashed in the money." She felt a chill run down her spine. "But how did you find out? I was so careful." He sighed, now calmer but still firm. "You weren't as careful as you thought. Sarah suspected something and told me. From there, it was only a matter of time before I found the ticket. I did what anyone would do to protect what's ours." Violet tried to maintain her composure, but it was impossible to hide the panic in her voice. You had no right to do this." James looked at her, disappointed. "No right. Violet, after everything we've been through together, you tried to deceive me, to push me aside so you could keep everything. I just did what I needed to do to make sure you didn't take advantage of me." She tried to argue, but the words seemed to escape her. I thought I was doing what was best for me, for us." James shook his head, clearly hurt. "The best for us? You wanted to leave me with nothing, Violet. I always trusted you, and you decided I didn't deserve a part of this. But now everything's changed. The money is already secure, and I won't let you manipulate me." Violet felt cornered, realizing she had lost. "James, please. We can resolve this another way." James, exhausted, just watched her for a moment before responding. "I wanted to give you a chance, Violet, but now it's too late. The truth is out in the open. We'll move forward, but not in the way you imagined." Violet, defeated, knew there was nothing more to say. James had uncovered everything, and now it was up to him to decide what would happen next. The shock of James's words left Violet paralyzed. Everything she had planned was crumbling before her eyes. Desperation began to take hold, and for the first time she realized what she was about to lose. Trying to control her trembling voice, she looked at James, seeking a last way out. "James, please, we don't have to do this. We can forget all this and start over. I made a mistake, but we can fix this." James stared at her, the hurt evident in his eyes. "Violet, it's not that simple. You betrayed me, tried to deceive me to keep everything. This isn't something that can be fixed with an apology." She stood up, almost knocking over the chair, her voice desperate. "I was confused, James. I thought it was what was best for me, for us. But now I see I was wrong. I don't want to lose you. We can start over, please." James took a deep breath, shaking his head. "Violet, you made your decisions. You chose this path when you decided to deceive me. I can't just pretend nothing happened." Violet, feeling everything slipping away, approached him, trying to reach for his hand. "James, I love you. I've always loved you. It was a mistake, I know, but we can't throw everything away because of this. Let's work it out together, like we always have." James gently pulled his hand away, refusing her touch. "Violet, I loved you, but what you did was beyond what I can forgive. It's not just about the money. It's about trust, respect, and that's been broken between us." Tears began to stream down Violet's face as she stammered, almost begging. "Please, James, give me another chance. I don't want to lose you. I don't want it to end like this." But James, although clearly moved by her pain, remained firm. "Violet, I've made my decision. I'm not going back. The divorce is already done. I can't stay with someone who was ready to leave me out of what was ours. I'm sorry, but it's too late." Violet sank back into the chair, defeated, with her face in her hands. She knew James was serious. The chance she had wasted, and now nothing she said or did could change what had happened. After what felt like an eternity of silence, James took a deep breath and looked at Violet, who was still devastated and without strength. He could see the regret on her face, and despite all the pain he had felt, he was not a cruel man. "Violet," he began in a softer tone, "despite everything that's happened, I don't want you to walk away from this with nothing. We built a life together, and I won't forget the years we spent side by side." Violet raised her eyes, surprised, still with tears streaming down. "What are you saying, James?" He sighed and continued, with firmness, but also a certain tenderness. "I've decided that half of the money is yours." She looked at him, incredulous, trying to understand if he really meant it. You're really willing to do that? Even after everything I did?" James nodded with a serene expression. "Yes, Violet. I won't deny that what you did hurt me, but I can't ignore the time we spent together and what we built. It's not just about the money. It's about what we had, what was important to both of us." Violet shook her head, still stunned. I don't know what to say, James. I don't deserve this, not after how I treated you." James smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "Maybe not, but I don't want to carry this resentment with me. Life is too short to stay trapped in bitterness and grudges. Let's move on, each on our own path, but with the dignity that we both deserve." Violet felt a weight lift off her shoulders, mixed with deep sadness for what she had lost, but also genuine gratitude. "James, I'll never forget what you're doing for me. Thank you." He simply nodded, signaling that her words were enough. "Now, let's end this in the best way possible. We have a new life ahead of us, and I want us both to move forward in peace." With the divorce finalized and the money divided, Violet found herself with a significant sum in her hands. For the first time in her life, she had the freedom to spend as she wished, without needing to consult anyone. What began as a feeling of empowerment quickly turned into a series of impulsive decisions. Violet started buying things she had always wanted but could never afford: expensive clothes, jewelry, luxurious furniture. "I deserve this," she told herself as she swiped her card without a second thought. Within a few months, she moved into an expensive apartment in the city center, furnished with the best money could buy. She hosted extravagant parties, dined at fine restaurants, always surrounded by people she barely knew, but who loved being around someone who seemed so successful. But as the months passed, the money began to disappear. Violet had no experience managing large amounts, and every time she looked at her account balance, it was smaller. She ignored the warning signs, believing the money would last forever. "I still have plenty," she told herself, trying to push away the worry as she bought yet another new car or took another luxurious trip. It wasn't until the bank contacted her about negative balances and unpaid bills that reality started to sink in. Violet realized that the fortune she once held in her hands was nearly gone. She tried selling some of the things she had bought, but the value didn't come close to what she had spent. One night, alone in her almost empty apartment, Violet sat at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of bills she couldn't pay. All the money that once represented freedom and new opportunities was now lost, and she found herself in a worse situation than before she won the lottery. The phone rang and she answered with a heavy sigh. It was Elizabeth, her old neighbor. "Violet, how are you? We haven't spoken much lately." Violet tried to hide the bitterness in her voice. "I'm fine, Elizabeth. Just going through some difficulties." Elizabeth, with her warm voice, replied, "If you need anything, I'm here. You know that, right?" Violet muttered a thank you, hanging up soon after. She knew no one could fix the mess she had created. Sitting there, in the silence of the apartment that once represented her new life, Violet finally understood what she had lost. And it wasn't just the money. While Violet sank into debt and regret, James took a very different path. With his share of the prize, he decided to act with wisdom and generosity, reflecting on what really mattered in life. The first thing he did was visit Sarah and Mrs. Elizabeth. Sitting in the cozy living room of their house, James looked at the two of them with a sincere smile. "I want to thank you both for everything you did for me. If it weren't for your help, Sarah, I would have lost everything." Sarah, surprised, shook her head. "James, you don't need to thank us. I did what was right." But James was determined. and that's why I want to give back. You helped me in a difficult time, and now it's my turn to do something for you." Mrs. Elizabeth, with her kind eyes, smiled. "James, you're already like an angel to us. You don't need to do anything but be happy." James smiled, moved. "I know, but this is important to me. I've decided to use part of the prize to make sure you're both well. I want to have this house renovated so you can live more comfortably. And Sarah, I want to help you finish your law studies without financial worries." Sarah was speechless, her eyes filling with tears. "James, this is more than I could have ever dreamed of. You have no idea how much this means." James just shook his head. "You both deserve it. This money isn't just for me. I want it to make a difference for the people who really matter in my life." With the remaining prize money, James bought a new home for himself, modest but comfortable, in a quiet neighborhood. He invested wisely, ensuring a stable income for the future. But above all, he found peace. He began dedicating his time to community projects and helping others who were going through difficulties, just as he had. Months later, on a sunny afternoon, James invited Sarah and Mrs. Elizabeth to his new home for lunch. The house, filled with light and with a well-tended garden, reflected the peaceful and happy life he had chosen to build. Sitting around the table, James looked at them and said with genuine gratitude, "Life gave me a second chance, and I want you to know that the happiness I feel now is only possible because I had true friends by my side. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart." Sarah, now a law student, smiled, and Mrs. Elizabeth held James's hand with affection. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, James, and you deserve all the happiness you've built." And so, while Violet lamented her choices, James built a new life, surrounded by people who truly mattered, finding happiness in the simple things and in the support of those who had always been by his side. This brings us to the end of this emotional story. If you enjoyed it, please share what you learned, and I'll leave another story here that I'm sure you'll love.